Instructions for Form SS4. Reverend December 2023. Application for Employer Identification Number IN. Department of the Treasury Internal Revenue Service. Section references are to the Internal Revenue Code unless otherwise noted. General instructions. Use these instructions to complete Form SS4. Application for Employer Identification Number E. Also, see Do I Need an EIN? On page 2 of Form SS4. Future developments. For the latest information related to Form SS4 and its instructions, such as legislation enacted after they were published, go to irs.gov/Forms 4. What's new? Line 14. Form SS4, line 14, now reflects the ceiling for wages paid by employers in U.S. territories electing to file Form 944. This information has been available in the instructions for line 14. Indian Tribal Governments Enterprises. We added guidance to line 1 and line 9A later for Indian tribal governments and for certain tribal enterprises that are not recognized as separate entities for federal tax purposes. Under Regulation Section 301.770-1A3. Forms SS4 and SS4SP absorb Form SS4PR. Form SS4PR, Solicitud de Número de Identificación Patronal, will no longer be available after 2023. Instead, if you are an employer in Puerto Rico, you will file Form SS4. If you prefer your form and instructions in Spanish, you can file new Form SS4SP, Solicitud de Número de Identificación del Empleador in each thread, 51 and Pub, 80 rolled into Pub, 15 plus new Pub, 15 SP, Pub, 51, Agricultural Employers Tax Guide and Pub, 80%, Federal Tax Guide for employers in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, will no longer be available after 2023. Instead, information specific to agricultural employers and employers in the U.S. territories will be included in Pub. 15. Employer's Tax Guide, beginning with the Pub. For use in 2024. Beginning in 2024, there will be a new Pub. 15 SP, that is a Spanish language version of Pub. 15. Purpose of Form. Use Form SS4 to apply for an EIN. An EIN is a 9-digit number. For example, 12 to 3,456,789, assigned to sole proprietors, corporations, partnerships, estates, trusts, and other entities for tax filing and reporting purposes. The information you provide on this form will establish your business tax account. See Form SS4SP, Spanish, for the Spanish language TIT version of Form SS4. An EIN is for use in connection with your business activities only. Don't use your EIN in place of your Social Security caution number, SSN, or Individual Taxpayer Identification Number, ITIN. Reminders. Apply for an EIN online. For applicants in the U.S. or U.S. territories, you can apply for and receive an EIN free of charge on irs.gov. See how to apply for an EIN later. Keep Form SS4 information current. Use Form 8822B to report changes to your responsible party address or location. Changes in responsible parties must be reported to the IRS within 60 days. File only one Form SS4. Generally, a sole proprietor should file only one Form SS4 and needs only one E. Regardless of the number of businesses operated as a sole proprietorship or trade names under which a business operates. However, if a sole proprietorship incorporates or enters into a partnership, a new IN is required. Also, each corporation in an affiliated group must have its own EIN. IN applied for but not received. If you don't have an EIN by the time a return is due, write applied for and the date you applied in the space shown for the number. Don't show your SSN as an EIN on returns. If you don't have an EIN by the time a tax deposit is due, send your payment to the Internal Revenue Service Center for your filing area as shown in the instructions for the form that you are filing. Make your check or money order payable to the United States Treasury and show your name as shown on Form SS4, address, type of tax, period covered, and date you applied for an EIN. For information about IRS federal tax deposits, see Tip Pub. 15. To ensure fair and equitable treatment for all taxpayers, issuances are limited to one per responsible party per day. Caution. For trusts, the limitation is applied to the grantor, owner, or trustor. For estates, the limitation is applied to the decedent estate, or the debtor bankruptcy estate. This limitation is applicable to all requests for IRS, whether online, telephone, fax, or mail. How to apply for an EIN. You can apply for an EIN online, only for applicants in the U.S. or U.S. territories. By telephone, only for applicants outside of the U.S. or U.S. territories. By fax, or by mail. Depending on how soon you need to use the EIN. Use only one method for each entity so you don't receive more than one EIN for an entity. Apply for an EIN online. If you have a legal residence, principal place of business, or principal office or agency in the U.S. or U.S. territories, you can receive an EIN online and use it immediately to file a return or make a payment. Go to the IRS website at irs.gov/.in. The principal officer, general partner, grantor, owner, truster, etc. must have a valid taxpayer identification number SSN, EIN, or ITIN in order to use the online application. Taxpayers who apply online have an option to view, print, and save their EIN assignment notice at the end of the session. Authorized third-party designees, see line 18 later. If you have no legal residence, principal place of business, or principal office or agency in the U.S. or U.S. territories, caution. You can't use the online application to obtain an EIN. Please use one of the other methods to apply. Apply by telephone, option available to international applicants only. If you have no legal residence, principal place of business, or principal office or agency in the U.S. or U.S. territories, you may call 2-67941. 1099, not a toll-free number, 6 a.m. to 11:00 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, to obtain an EIN. The person making the call must be authorized to receive the EIN and answer questions concerning Form SS4. Complete the third-party designee section only if you want to authorize the named. January 4th, 2024 CAT. Number 62,736 Fahrenheit. Individual to receive the entity's EIN and answer questions about the completion of Form SS4. The designee's authority terminates at the time the EIN is assigned and released to the designee. You must complete the signature area for the authorization to be valid. Note: it will be helpful to complete Form SS4 before contacting the IRS. An IRS representative will use the information from Form SS4 to establish your account and assign you an EIN. Write the number you're given on the upper right corner of the form and sign and date it. Keep this copy for your records. If requested by an IRS representative, mail or fax the signed Form SS4, including any third-party designee authorization, within 24 hours to the IRS address provided by the IRS representative. The IRS no longer issues EINs by telephone for domestic taxpayers. Only international applicants can receive an EIN. Caution. By telephone, apply by fax. Under the Fax TIN program, you can receive your EIN by fax generally within 4 business days. Complete and fax Form SS4 to the IRS using the appropriate fax number listed in Where to File or Fax later. A long-distance charge to callers outside of the local calling area will apply. Fax TIN numbers can only be used to apply for an EIN. The numbers may change without notice. Fax TIN is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Be sure to provide your fax number so the IRS can fax the EIN back to you. Apply by mail. Complete Form SS4 at least 4 to 5 weeks before you will need an EIN. Sign and date the application and mail it to the appropriate address listed in Where to File or Fax later. You will receive your EIN in the mail in approximately 4 weeks. Also, see third-party designee later. Call 800-82-94933 to verify a number or to ask about the status of an application by mail. Form SS4, downloaded from irs.gov, is a fillable form and, tip when completed, is suitable for faxing or mailing to the IRS. Where to file or fax. If you have a principal place of file or fax to, business, office or agency, or legal residence in the case of an individual located in one of the 50 states or the District of Columbia, Internal Revenue Service in operation Cincinnati, Ohio 45,999. Fax 855-6416935. Internal Revenue Service ATTN, IN International Operation, Cincinnati, Ohio 45,999. If you have no legal residence, principal office, or principal agency in any state or the District of Columbia International U.S. Territories fax, within the U.S. fax, outside the U.S., how to get tax help, forms, and publications. Tax help for your business is available at irs.gov/.tipbusinesses. You can download or print all of the forms and publications you may need on irs.gov/formspubs. Otherwise, you can go to irs.gov/orderforms. To place an order and have forms mailed to you. You should receive your order within business days if the items are available. Related forms and publications. The following forms and instructions may be useful to filers of Form SS4. Form 11C, Occupational Tax and Registration Return for Wagering. Form 637, Application for Registration for certain excise tax activities. Form 720, Quarterly Federal Excise Tax Return. Form 730, Monthly Tax Return for Wagers. Form 941, Employer's Quarterly Federal Tax Return. Form 944, Employer's Annual Federal Tax Return. Form 990T, Exempt Organization Business Income Tax Return, and Proxy Tax under Section 6033E. Instructions for Form 990T, Exempt Organization Business Income Tax Return. Form 1023, Application for Recognition of Exemption under Section 501C3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Form 1024, Application for Recognition of Exemption under Section 501A. Schedule C, Form 1040, Profit or Loss from Business Sole Proprietorship. Schedule F, Form 1040, Profit or Loss from Farming. Instructions for Form 1041, and Schedules A, B, G, J, and K1, US. Income Tax Return for Estates and Trusts. Form 1042, Annual Withholding Tax Return for U.S. Source Income of Foreign Persons. Form 1042-S, Foreign Persons US. Source Income Subject to Withholding. Instructions for Form 1065, U.S. Return of Partnership Income. Instructions for Form 1066, U.S. Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit REMIC Income Tax Return. Instructions for Form 1120, U.S. Corporation Income Tax Return. Form 1120-S, U.S. Income Tax Return for an S Corporation. Form 2290, Heavy Highway Vehicle Use Tax Return. Form 2553, Election by a Small Business Corporation. Form 2848, Power of Attorney and Declaration of Representative. Form 8821, Tax Information Authorization. Form 8822B, Change of Address or Responsible Party, Business. Form 8832, Entity Classification Election. Form 8849, Claim for Refund of Excise Taxes. For more information about filing Form SS4 and related issues, see Pub 15, Employer's Tax Guide. Pub 538, Accounting Periods and Methods. Pub 542, Corporations. Pub 557, Tax Exempt Status for your organization. Pub 583, Starting a Business and Keeping Records. Pub 966, Electronic Choices to Pay All Your Federal Taxes. Pub 1635, Understanding Your EIN. Specific instructions. Follow the instructions for each line to expedite processing and to avoid unnecessary IRS requests for additional information. Generally enter NA on the lines that don't apply. Line 1. Legal name of entity or individual for whom the IN is being requested. Enter the legal name of the entity or individual applying for the EIN exactly as it appears on the Social Security card, charter, or other applicable legal document. An entry is required. Individuals, enter your first name, middle initial, and last name. If you're a sole proprietor, enter your individual name, not your business name. Enter your business name on line 2. Don't use abbreviations or nicknames on line 1. Trusts. Enter the name of the trust as it appears on the trust instrument. Estate of a decedent. Enter the name of the estate. For an estate that has no legal name, enter the name of the decedent followed by estate. Partnerships. Enter the legal name of the partnership as it appears in the partnership agreement. 2 Instar. For Form SS for Reverend 12 to 2023. Corporations. Enter the corporate name as it appears in the corporate charter or other legal document creating it. Plan administrators. Enter the name of the plan administrator. A plan administrator who already has an EIN should use that number. Indian Tribal Governments Enterprises. Enter the legal name of the Indian Tribal Government or Tribal Enterprise applying for the EIN. Line 2. Trade name of business. Enter the trade name of business if different from the legal name. The trade name is the doing business as DBA name. Use the full legal name shown on line 1 on all tax returns filed for the entity. However, if you enter a trade name on caution, line 2 and choose to use the trade name instead of the legal name, enter the trade name on all returns you file. To prevent processing delays and errors, use only the legal name or the trade name on all tax returns. Line 3. Executor, administrator, trustee, care of name. For trusts, enter the name of the trustee. For estates, enter the name of the executor, administrator, personal representative, or other fiduciary. If the entity applying has a designated person to receive tax information, enter that person's name as the care of person. Enter the individual's first name, middle initial, and last name. Lines 4A, 4 billions. Mailing address. Enter the mailing address for the entity's correspondence. If the entity's address is outside the United States or its territories, you must enter the city, province, or state, postal code, and the name of the country. Don't abbreviate the country name. If line 3 is completed, enter the address for the executor, trustee, or care of person. Generally, this address will be used on all tax returns. If the entity is filing Form SS4, only to obtain an EIN for Form 8832, use the same address where you would like to have the acceptance or non-acceptance letter sent. File Form 8822B to report any subsequent changes to the tip entity's mailing address, lines 5A, 5 billions. Street address. Provide the entity's physical address only if different from its mailing address shown on lines 4A, 4 billions. Don't enter a P.O. box number here. If the entity's address is outside the United States or its territories, you must enter the city, province, or state, postal code, and the name of the country. Don't abbreviate the country name. Line 6. County and state where principal business is located. Enter the entity's primary physical location. Line 7A, 7 billions. Name of responsible party. Enter full name, first name, middle initial, last name, if applicable, and SSN, ITIN, or IN of the entity's responsible party. Responsible party defined. The responsible party is the person who ultimately owns or controls the entity, or who exercises ultimate effective control over the entity. The person identified as the responsible party should have a level of control over, or entitlement to, the funds or assets in the entity that, as a practical matter, enables the person directly or indirectly to control, manage, or direct the entity and the disposition of its funds and assets. Unless the applicant is a government entity, the responsible party must be an individual, that is, a natural person, not an entity. For entities with shares or interests traded on a public exchange or which are registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, responsible party is A, the principal officer. If the entity is a corporation, or B, a general partner, if a partnership, the general requirement that the responsible party be an individual applies to these entities. For example, If a corporation is the general partner of a publicly traded partnership for which Form SS-4 is filed, then the responsible party of the partnership is the principal officer of the corporation. For tax-exempt organizations, the responsible party is generally the same as the principal officer, as defined in the Form 990 instructions. For government entities, the responsible party is generally the agency or agency representative in a position to legally bind the particular government entity. For trusts, the responsible party is a grantor, owner, or truster. For decedent estates, the responsible party is the executor, administrator, personal representative, or other fiduciary. File Form 8822B to report any subsequent changes to TIP responsible party information. If you're applying for an EIN for a government entity, you may enter an EIN for the responsible party on line 7 billions. Otherwise, you must enter an SSN or ITIN on line 7 billions, but leave line 7 billions blank or enter NA, foreign or similar language, if the responsible party doesn't have and is ineligible to obtain an SSN or ITIN. Lines 8A 8 Celsiuses, Limited Liability Company LLC information. An LLC is an entity organized under the laws of a state or foreign country as a limited liability company. For federal tax purposes, an LLC may be treated as a partnership or corporation or be disregarded as an entity separate from its owner. By default, a domestic LLC with only one member is disregarded as an entity separate from its owner and must include all of its income and expenses on the owner's tax return. For example, Schedule C, Form 1040. For more information on single-member LLCs, see disregarded entities later. Also, by default, a domestic LLC with 2 or more members is treated as a partnership. A domestic LLC may file Form 8832 to avoid either default classification and elect to be classified as an association taxable as a corporation. For more information on entity classifications, including the rules for foreign entities, see Form 8832 and its instructions. If the answer to line 8A is yes, enter the number of LLC members. If the LLC is owned solely by an individual and his or her spouse in a community property state, and they choose to treat the entity as a disregarded entity, enter 1 on line 8 billions. Don't file Form 8832 if the LLC accepts the default classifications above. If the LLC timely files Form 2553, it will caution. Be treated as a corporation as of the effective date of the S-corporation election, as long as it meets all other requirements to qualify as an S-corporation. The LLC doesn't need to file Form 8832 in addition to Form 2553. See the instructions for Form 2553. Line 9A, Type of Entity. Check the box that best describes the type of entity applied for the EIN. If you're an alien individual with an ITIN previously assigned to you, enter the ITIN in place of a requested SSN. This isn't an election for a tax classification of an entity. See disregarded entities later. Caution, sole proprietor. Check this box if you file Schedule C or Schedule F, Form 1040, and have a qualified plan, or are required to file excise, employment, alcohol, tobacco, or firearms returns, or are a payer of gambling winnings. Enter your SSN or ITIN in the space provided. If you're a non-resident alien with no effectively connected income from sources within the United States, enter NA. You don't need to enter an SSN or ITIN. Corporation. This box is for any corporation other than a personal service corporation. If you check this box, enter the income tax form number to be filed by the entity in the space provided. Unless you are a church or church-controlled organization. Tip: if you are a corporation that is a nonprofit entity, check the Other Nonprofit Organization box and specify the purpose. See Other Nonprofit Organization later. If you entered 1120 S, after the corporation checkbox, the corporation must file Form 2553 no later than the 15th day of caution. The third month of the tax year the election is to take effect. Until Form 2553 has been received and approved, you will be considered a Form 1120 filer. See the instructions for Form 2553. Instayer. For Form SS4, Reverend 12 to 2023-3. Personal Service Corporation. Check this box if the entity is a personal service corporation. An entity is a personal service corporation for a tax year only if the principal activity of the entity during the testing period, generally the prior tax year for the tax year, is the performance of personal services, substantially by employee owners, and the employee owners own at least 10% of the fair market value of the outstanding stock in the entity on the last day of the testing period. Personal services include performance of services in such fields as accounting, actuarial science, architecture, consulting, engineering, health including veterinary services, law, and the performing arts. For more information about personal service corporations, see the instructions for Form 1120 in Pub. 542. If the corporation is recently formed, the testing period begins on the first day of its tax year and ends on the earlier caution of the last day of its tax year, or the last day of the calendar year in which its tax year begins. Other nonprofit organization. Check the Other Nonprofit Organization box if the nonprofit organization is other than a church or church-controlled organization and specify the type of nonprofit organization, for example, an educational organization. If the organization also seeks tax-exempt status, you must file either Form 1023 or Form 1023-EZ or Form 1024. See Caution, Pub. 557 for more information. If the organization is covered by a group exemption letter, enter the 4-digit group exemption number GEN in the last entry. Don't confuse the GEN with the 9-digit EIN. If you don't know the general, contact the parent organization. See Pub. 557 for more information about group exemption letters. If the organization is a Section 527 political organization, check the Other Nonprofit Organization box and specify Section 527 organization in the space to the right. To be recognized as exempt from tax, a Section 527 political organization must electronically file Form 8871, Political Organization Notice of Section 527 status, within 24 hours of the date on which the organization was established. The organization may also have to file Form 8872, Political Organization Report of Contributions and Expenditures. Form 8872 must be filed electronically. Go to irs.gov/polorgs. For more information. Estate. An estate is a legal entity created as a result of a person's death. Enter the SSN or ITIN of the deceased person in the space provided. Plan Administrator. If the plan administrator is an individual, enter the plan administrator's taxpayer identification number, TIN, in the space provided. RIMIC. Check this box. If the entity has elected to be treated as a real estate mortgage investment conduit, REMIC. See the instructions for Form 1066 for more information. State local government. State and local governments generally have the characteristics of a government, such as powers of taxation, law enforcement, and civil authority. If you're unsure whether or not your organization is a government, search What are government entities at irs.gov. For clarification, federal government. The federal government is made up of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, as well as independent federal agencies. Unions, veterans of foreign wars, VFW organizations, and political organizations aren't federal agencies. Indian Tribal Government Enterprise. Check the box for Indian tribal governments, enterprises for a governing body of any tribe, band, community, village, or group of Indians, or if applicable, Alaska Natives. But only if the Secretary of the Treasury, after consultation with the Secretary of the Interior, determines that the governing body exercises governmental functions. Similarly, check this box if you are requesting an EIN for a tribal enterprise that is not recognized as a separate entity for federal income tax purposes, for example, a corporation under Section 17 of the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 or Section 3 of the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act, For more information, see Regulations Section 301.7701-1A3, Reverend Rule. 94-16, 1994 to 1 CB 19. Available at irs.gov/pub/irs/tegi/.rr.pdf, and Reverend Rule. 94-65, 1994 to 2 CB 14. Available at irs.gov/pub/irs/tegi/rr.pdf. Other. If not specifically listed, check the Other box and enter the type of entity and the type of return, if any, that will be filed. For example, Common Trust Fund Form 1065 or created a pension plan. Don't enter NA. If you're an alien individual applying for an EIN, see line 7A to 7B earlier. Household employer. If you're an individual that will employ someone to provide services in your household, check the Other box and enter household employer and your SSN. If you're a trust that qualifies as a household employer, you don't need a separate EIN for reporting tax information relating to household employees. Use the IN of the trust. Household employer agent. If you're an agent of a household employer that is a disabled individual or other welfare recipient receiving home care services through a state or local program, check the Other box and enter household employer agent. For more information, see Reverend Proc. 84 to 33 and Reverend Proc. 2013 to 39. If you're a state or local government, also check the state local government box. XUB. For a qualified subchapter S subsidiary QSUB, check the Other box and specify QA. See Reverend Rule. October 18, 2008. October 13, 2008. IRB 674. If the QSUB election is made pursuant to a reorganization under Section 368 F and disregarded entities below. Withholding agent. If you're a withholding agent required to file Form 1042, check the Other box and enter withholding agent. Disregarded entities. A disregarded entity is an eligible entity that is treated as an entity not separate from its single owner for income tax purposes. Disregarded entities include single-member limited liability companies, LLCs, and certain qualified foreign entities. See the instructions for Forms 8832 and 8869 and Regulations Section 301.7701-3 for more information on domestic and foreign disregarded entities. The disregarded entity is required to use its name and IN for reporting and payment of employment taxes, to register for excise tax activities on Form 637. To pay and report excise taxes reported on Form 720, 730, 2290, and 11C, to claim any refunds, credits, and payments on Form 8849. And where a U.S. disregarded entity is wholly owned by a foreign person, to file information returns on Form 5472. See the instructions for the employment and excise tax returns in Form 5472 for more information. Complete Form SS4 for disregarded entities as follows. If a disregarded entity is filing Form SS4 to obtain an EIN because it is required to report and pay employment and excise taxes, or for non-federal purposes such as a state requirement, check the Other box for line 9A and write disregarded entity or disregarded entity's sole proprietorship if the owner of the disregarded entity is an individual. If the disregarded entity is requesting an EIN for purposes of filing Form 5472, as required under Section 6038A for a U.S. disregarded entity that is wholly owned by a foreign person, check the Other box for line 9A and write Foreign-Owned U.S. Disregarded Entity Form 5472. If the disregarded entity is requesting an EIN for purposes of filing Form 8832 to elect classification as an association taxable as a corporation, or Form 2553 to elect S corporation status, check the corporation box for line 9A and write single member and the form number of the return that will be filed, Form 1120 or 1120S. If the disregarded entity is requesting an EIN because it has acquired one or more additional owners and its classification has changed to partnership under the default rules of regulations, Section 301.770. -3. Check the partnership box for line 9A. If a foreign eligible entity is requesting an EIN for purposes of filing Form 8832 to elect classification as a disregarded entity, check the other box for line 9A and write Foreign Disregarded Entity. Line 10. Reason for applying. Check only one box. Don't enter an A. A selection is required. Foreign star. For Form SS4, Reverend 12 to 2023. Started new business. Check this box if you're starting a new business that requires an EIN. If you check this box, enter the type of business being started. Don't apply if you already have an EIN and are only adding another place of business. Hired employees. Check this box if the existing business is requesting an EIN because it is hired or is hiring employees and is therefore required to file employment tax returns. Don't apply if you already have an EIN and are only hiring employees. For information on employment taxes, for example, for family members, see Pub. 15. You must make electronic deposits of all depository taxes, such as employment tax, excise tax, and corporate income caution tax, using EFTPs. See Pub. 15 and Pub. 966. Banking purpose. Check this box if you're requesting an EIN for banking purposes only, and enter the banking purpose, for example, a bowling league for depositing dues or an investment club for dividend and interest reporting. Change type of organization. Check this box if the business is changing its type of organization. For example, the business was a sole proprietorship and has been incorporated or has become a partnership. If you check this box, specify in the space provided, including available space immediately below, the type of change made. For example, from sole proprietorship to partnership. Purchased going business. Check this box if you purchased an existing business. Don't use the former owner's EIN unless you became the owner of a corporation by acquiring its stock. Created a trust. Check this box if you created a trust and enter the type of trust created. For example, indicate if the trust is a non-exempt charitable trust or a split interest trust. Exception. Don't file this form for certain grantor-type trusts. The trustee doesn't need an EIN for the trust if the trustee furnishes the name and TIN of the grantor and the address of the trust to all payers. However, grantor trusts that don't file using optional method 1 and IRA trusts that are required to file Form 990T must have an EIN. For more information on grantor trusts, see the instructions for Form 1041. Don't check this box if you're applying for a trust EIN when a TIP new pension plan is established. Check the Created a Pension Plan box. Created a pension plan. Check this box if you have created a pension plan and need an EIN for reporting purposes. Also, enter the type of plan in the space provided. For more information about pension plans, visit irs.gov and enter types of retirement plans in the search box. Check this box if you're applying for a trust EIN when a new TIP pension plan is established. In addition, check the other box on line 9A and write Created a pension plan in the space provided. Other. Check this box if you're requesting an EIN for any other reason and enter the reason. For example, a newly formed state government entity should enter Newly formed state government entity in the space provided. A foreign-owned U.S. disregarded entity required to file Form 5472 should enter Foreign-owned U.S. disregarded entity filing Form 5472 in the space provided. Line 11. Business started or acquired. If you're starting a new business, enter the starting date of the business. If the business you acquired is already operating, enter the date you acquired the business. For foreign applicants, this is the date you began or acquired a business in the United States. If you're changing the form of ownership of your business, enter the date the new ownership entity began. Trusts should enter the date the trust was funded or the date that the trust was required to obtain an EIN under regulations. Section 301.6109 to 102. Estates should enter the date of death of the decedent whose name appears on line 1, or the date when the estate was legally funded. Line 12. Closing month of accounting year. Enter the last month of your accounting year or tax year. An accounting or tax year is usually 12 consecutive months, either a calendar year or a fiscal year, including a period of 52 or 53 weeks. A calendar year is 12 consecutive months ending on December 31. A fiscal year is either 12 consecutive months ending on the last day of any month other than December, or a 52 to 53 week year. For more information on accounting periods, see Pub. 538. Individuals. Your tax year will generally be a calendar year. Partnerships. Partnerships must adopt one of the following tax years. The tax year of the majority of its partners. The tax year common to all of its principal partners. The tax year that results in the least aggregate deferral of income. In certain cases, some other tax year. See the instructions for Form 1065 for more information. Remics. Remics must have a calendar year as their tax year. Personal service corporations. A personal service corporation must generally adopt a calendar year unless it meets one of the following requirements. It can establish a business purpose for having a different tax year. It elects under Section 444 to have a tax year other than a calendar year. Trusts. Generally, a trust must adopt a calendar year except for the following trusts. Tax-exempt trusts. Charitable trusts. Grantor-owned trusts. Line 13. Highest number of employees expected in the next 12 months. Complete each box by entering the number including 0 of agricultural, household, or other employees expected by the applicant in the next 12 months. If no employees are expected, skip line 14. Line 14. Do you want to file Form 944? If you expect your employment tax liability to be $1,000 or less in a full calendar year, you're eligible to file Form 944 annually once each year, instead of filing Form 941 quarterly every 3 months. Your employment tax liability will generally be $1,000 or less if you expect to pay $5,000 or less in total wages subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes and federal income tax withholding. For employees in the U.S. territories, generally, if you pay $6,536 or less in wages subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes, you're likely to pay $1,000 or less in employment taxes. If you qualify and want to file Form 944 instead of Forms 941, check the box on line 14. If you don't check the box, then you must file Form 941 for every quarter. Once you check the box, you must continue to file Form 944, regardless of the amount of tax shown on your return, until caution. The IRS instructs you to file Form 941. For more information on employment taxes, see Pub. 15. Line 15. First date wages or annuities were paid. If the business has employees, enter the date on which the business began to pay wages or annuities. For foreign applicants, this is the date you began to pay wages in the United States. If the business doesn't plan to have employees, enter N withholding agent. Enter the date you began or will begin to pay income, including annuities, to a non-resident alien. This also applies to individuals who are required to file Form 1042 to report alimony paid to a non-resident alien. For foreign applicants, this is the date you began or will begin to pay income, including annuities, to a non-resident alien in the United States. Line 16. Check the one box on line 16 that best describes the principal activity of the applicant's business. Check the other box and specify the applicant's principal activity if none of the listed boxes applies. You must check a box. Construction. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in erecting buildings or engineering projects, for example, streets, highways, bridges, and tunnels. The term construction also includes special trade contractors, for example, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, carpentry, concrete, excavation, etc. contractors. Real estate. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in renting or leasing real estate to others, managing, selling, buying, or renting. In star. For Form SS4, Reverend 12 to 2023. 5. real estate for others, or providing related real estate services, for example, appraisal services. Also, check this box for mortgage real estate investment trusts REITs. Mortgage REITs are engaged in issuing shares of funds consisting primarily of portfolios of real estate mortgage assets with gross income of the trust solely derived from interest earned. Rental and leasing. Check the box if the applicant is engaged in providing tangible goods such as autos, computers, consumer goods, or industrial machinery and equipment to customers in return for a periodic rental or lease payment. Also, check this box for equity real estate investment trusts REITs. Equity REITs engaged in issuing shares of funds consisting primarily of portfolios of real estate assets with gross income of the trust derived from renting real property, manufacturing. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in the mechanical, physical, or chemical transformation of materials, substances, or components into new products. The assembling of component parts of manufactured products is also considered to be manufacturing. Transportation and warehousing. Check this box if the applicant provides transportation of passengers or cargo, warehousing or storage of goods, scenic or sightseeing transportation, or support activities related to transportation. Finance and insurance. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in transactions involving the creation, liquidation, or change of ownership of financial assets or facilitating such financial transactions, underwriting annuities, insurance policies. Facilitating such underwriting by selling insurance policies or in providing other insurance or employee benefit-related services. Healthcare and social assistance. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in providing physical, medical, or psychiatric care, or in providing social assistance activities such as youth centers, adoption agencies, individual family services, temporary shelters, daycare, etc., accommodation and food services. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in providing customers with lodging, meal preparation, snacks, or beverages for immediate consumption. Wholesale, agent, broker. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in arranging for the purchase or sale of goods owned by others, or purchasing goods on a commission basis for goods traded in the wholesale market, usually between businesses. Wholesale, other. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in selling goods in the wholesale market generally to other businesses for resale on their own account, goods used in production, or capital, or durable non-consumer goods. Retail. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in selling merchandise to the general public from a fixed store by direct mail order or electronic sales, or by using vending machines. Other. Check this box if the applicant is engaged in an activity not described above. Describe the applicant's principal business activity in the space provided. Line 17. Use line 17 to describe the applicant's principal line of business in more detail. For example, if you check the construction box on line 16, enter additional details such as general contractor for residential buildings on line 17. An entry is required. For mortgage REITs, indicate mortgage REIT. And for equity REITs, indicate what type of real property is the principal type: residential REIT, non-residential REIT, mini warehouse REIT, etc. Line 18. Check the applicable box to indicate whether or not the applicant entity applying for an EIN was issued one previously. Third-party designee. Complete this section only if you want to authorize the named individual to answer questions about the completion of Form SS-4 and receive the entity's newly assigned EIN. You must complete the signature area for the authorization to be valid. The designee's authority terminates at the time the EIN is assigned and released to the designee. EINs are released to authorize third-party designees by the method they use to obtain the EIN online, telephone, or fax. However, the EIN notice will be mailed to the taxpayer. If the third-party designee's address or telephone number matches the address or telephone number of the taxpayer, caution: the application must be mailed or faxed. Signature. When required, the application must be signed by A, the individual, if the applicant is an individual, B, the president, vice president, or other principal officer. If the applicant is a corporation, C, a responsible and duly authorized member or officer having knowledge of its affairs. If the applicant is a partnership, government entity, or other unincorporated organization, or D, the fiduciary, if the applicant is a trust or an estate. Foreign applicants may have any duly authorized person, for example, Division Manager sign form SS-4. Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act notice. We ask for the information on this form to carry out the internal revenue laws of the United States. We needed to comply with Section 6109 and the regulations thereunder, which generally require the inclusion of an employer identification number, EIN on certain returns, statements, or other documents filed with the Internal Revenue Service. If your entity is required to obtain an EIN, you're required to provide all of the information requested on this form. Information on this form may be used to determine which federal tax returns you're required to file and to provide you with related forms and publications. We disclose this form to the Social Security Administration, SSA, for their use in determining compliance with applicable laws. We may give this information to the Department of Justice for use in civil and/or criminal litigation, and to cities, states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. Commonwealths and territories for use in administering their tax laws. We may also disclose this information to other countries under a tax treaty, to federal and state agencies to enforce federal non-tax criminal laws, and to federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies to combat terrorism. We will be able to issue an EIN to you unless you provide all of the requested information that applies to your entity. Providing false information could subject you to penalties. You're not required to provide the information requested on a form that is subject to the Paperwork Reduction Act unless the form displays a valid OMB control number. Books or records relating to a form or its instructions must be retained as long as their contents may become material in the administration of any internal revenue law. Generally, tax returns and return information are confidential, as required by Section 6103. The time needed to complete and file this form will vary, depending on individual circumstances. The estimated average time is record keeping, learning about the law or the form, preparing, copying, assembling, and sending the form to the IRS. 8 hours. 36. Min. 42 minutes. 52 minutes. If you have comments concerning the accuracy of these time estimates or suggestions for making this form simpler, we would be happy to hear from you. You can send us comments at irs.gov/.form-comments. Or you can write to the Internal Revenue Service, Tax Forms and Publications Division, 1111 Constitution Ave, NW, IR-6526, Washington, D.C. 20224. Don't send Form SS-4 to this address. Instead, see where to file or fax earlier. 6 in Estier, for Form SS-4, Reverend 12 to 2023.